Welcome back to Wellness Wave Radio. Thanks for tuning in this morning to ride the wave with us. Each week our goal is to give you at least one suggestion that will make your life a little better. My name is Phil George. I'm a clinical biochemist, a certified personal trainer, and a health coach. Please remember, everything we discuss on the show is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. And we have a great guest today. Rachel, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me today, Phil. My name is Rachel Boyer, licensed mental health counselor. I've been in the field for about 20 years. I have a bachelor's in psychology, master's in counseling, and I've had a lot of experience in the past working with a variety of people with different challenges. So I've worked on inpatient units, residential, for adolescent girls with behavioral issues and eating disorders, and then also day programs for same thing, eating disorders, and people with chronic mental health issues, so schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. And currently I work outpatient. I started my own outpatient practice about 2 years ago called Insightful Solutions Therapy. And in our outpatient setting, I see clients through telehealth, so virtually over video, mostly adults and adolescents, and they are challenged with mood disorders for the most part, so anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, and then also I specialize in eating disorders. So some of my clients do struggle with eating disorders as well. So I'm happy to be here today. As you can see behind me, I have published my new book, The Mind Reboot Toolkit, and I'm excited to share this today. It's I've been working on it for a couple years. It's really a compilation of a lot of the worksheets, things that I use with my clients specifically, because I do a lot of direct active work with my clients in sessions. So I'm happy to share that with others and really looking forward to getting that out there. So thank you.
Right, and we talked before, and Rachel, if you're interested, we did a whole hour on my radio show. So if you want to hear more, just email me, philgeorge@charter.net. philgeorge@charter.net. In fact, Rachel, if they want any information, and you can't remember email, just email me, and I'll shoot it over. I'll shoot it over to Rachel. So one of the things we talked on the show about was cognitive behavior therapy. Why don't we tell the listeners of the audience kind of what that is?
Sure. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a therapy that I use pretty frequently with my clients in session. It's one of my favorites because it is I like to use the word concrete. It's very tangible. It's something that people can grasp onto and see results within weeks of using it. So CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is based upon the concept or idea that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all connected. So once one shifts, the other will shift. So there's a few different types of skills within CBT, but one of the ones that I use a lot is cognitive restructuring. And what that involves is understanding what your unhelpful thoughts are, being able to test those thoughts, so looking for evidence for and against those thoughts, and then restructuring them with information, that learned information. So I like to use the dog example. So say that, Phil, you are afraid of dogs. Be careful now. So you see a dog and you think, oh no, dogs bite. You get scared, which is the feeling due to that thought, and then you run away. So that's the behavior. So what would we do would say, okay, let's start with that unhelpful thought, which is dogs bite. Now we're going to challenge or look at evidence. So we're going to be a detective here and look at evidence for, evidence against this. Okay, evidence for is that, yes, dogs do bite. And evidence against is that, dogs do bite. However, they only bite 1% of the time. So we really want to look at the for and against. Phil, you've also been bitten by dogs in the past as well. So that's something else that's a fact there. And then the other fact is we can see this dog, who we can't see it right now, but we see this dog that is happy, wagging its tail. So that's another fact that we can observe. So then we want to restructure or reframe that thought that you originally had. So we want to say, yes, dogs bite, and I've been bitten once before, but it is very rare, only 1% of the time that they do bite, and this dog looks safe. So what that might do is you would be less scared, and maybe you'll walk by the dog versus running by the dog. And the idea is that the more that we practice this with repetition, your body is going to start to learn that you're safe and be able to practice this and feel less anxious over time.
Right, so the whole point is kind of desensitizing, right?
Desensitizing.
We've seen that before with people with phobias like, arachnophobia of spiders.
Right.
What they will do sometimes is they'll put their hands on top of it, then get a little closer and closer, then maybe pet the spider. Or, or even like in terms of even you're afraid of heights, maybe a little bit here. So you kind of desensitizing. Also, you're kind of you're changing the way people relate to it, right?
Yes. Read that restructuring, and then the desensitization, which is another technique within CBT, is that exposure. It's exposure response therapy, and it can be used for anxiety. It's used a lot for people with OCD, and that is creating habituation. So you want to get somebody used to something to see that it's not a threat to them. So, whether it's tarantulas or heights, or you're afraid of, being in social situations, what we do is we create what's called a hierarchy of fears. So if you were anxious, socially, for example, so we're going to say, okay, here's a list of different social things: seeing people on TV, making phone calls, being out in public, and I'm going to have you rate how anxious each one of those make you. Then we're going to start with the lowest, least stressful event, and we're going to have you do that and experience it over and over and over until your anxiety decreases, because you're habituating. And you're going to say, okay, I feel comfortable with this now. So now let's go to the next higher stage. And that's where you work your way up to that bigger goal that you're trying to overcome.
So can you give us an example of maybe of a client you work with, I don't know, like, anorexia or something like that, and the kind of how you work with them and ran them through this particular type of program?
Yeah, so actually one example that does come to mind is somebody who did deal with saying no to people. That was something that he had a really difficult time doing, and saying no specifically to contractors coming into his house. That was like a big difficulty for him. So we actually started by, identifying least anxiety provoking situations where he might say no to somebody. So he started, one of his examples was he was donating money to somebody on YouTube that he didn't even know. So, we started with, okay, think about what you would say to these people, to say, no, I'm not going to donate to you anymore. Okay, you've done that. Now write the email. You don't need to send it, but write it. Okay, do that till you're comfortable. And then I'm going to go ahead and send the email, which is even more anxiety provoking, and going through those motions, and then making phone calls to people to ask for quotes and things like that. So we would move on the way up until he actually had these contractors in his house, or people coming to his house, and he felt much more comfortable with that and letting them in.
Right, that's the same thing, a little bit of baby steps. It's funny you should mention that, because as a biochemist, I'm always thinking root cause. What's the cause of this person doing that? There's something, most people have heard of the Myers-Briggs, which is basically personality types.
Right. Yeah.
There's another type, it's called the Enneagram, and the Enneagram is real interesting, and it breaks it down into 9 different, and I've studied this pretty extensively. And one of the types is called the type 2, and that type is called the giver. And this goes back to childhood kind of stuff you deal with.
Yep.
And what they found out, they get, in other words, they want to be liked because they give to people. And so how you were raised, whatever reason, you found out you could get the most attention by giving. And that's what happened. This sounds like this gentleman is at an extreme level. So what happens is you have to say, people will still like me even though I don't give them everything. Because I'm guessing he's just assuming they won't like me unless I say yes.
Yes. And, that whole root cause is really important too, is that beyond just going through these steps of, habituation, you do want to understand what that core, I refer to core beliefs a lot. It's that internal belief that drives or filters the way that we perceive things. So, that giver may be afraid of, people not liking them or, trying to please them. And that's really that core belief that's driving all of that. So I did do core belief with this person in particular, and we did drill down to a number of beliefs, him feeling like he was a bad person, like in his soul, that's what he felt. And that was a driver of a lot of the anxiety for him too.
And so much of it goes back to childhood. And we talked a little bit about it. I think up to the age of 6, you're basically in theta state all the time, which all it means that everything that happens, because we're one of the most vulnerable of all animals. When we're born, we're helpless. The giraffe runs around, chickens run around. So what happens? But we have to be taken care of. So the only way we can survive, like you said, we're looking at the mother, we're looking at the father. If they're afraid of the dog or whatever, or God forbid, you have a really bad parent and they tell you, you're never going to amount to anything, you're no good. That's hardwired. So you're running that in the back of your brain.
Yes.
So what you're able to do is go in there and go down, again, root cause. So what's the root cause? Let's fix the root cause of the problem in terms of going in and figuring out. And that, you're running your whole life pretty much on a faulty program in the back. We talked about this too. Some either men or women say, why do I keep dating these losers, these alcoholics, these this, these that? Because you may feel that you're not good enough and you're just playing out the script. You want to be punished, and basically for doing that.
Yeah, and that's a really helpful for people to understand is those core beliefs, and to understand that, that whole mind-body connection is that understanding those sort of things helps normalize, these things that happen to us, so that we can train our brain to think differently, act differently. But that's understanding those core beliefs is very valuable for people, because you bring up when we're born, we rely on the mother, the father, the caregivers. We're also flooded with so much information that our brains need to kind of put them in different buckets and try to make sense of them. So, we're trying to kind of take in all this information, but the caregivers are really initially leading us to define what the world is and define what good and bad is. And I try to share with my clients too, we're taught from a young age that good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. So where this becomes an issue is that if somebody experiences a traumatic event or experiences something that's, detrimental to them, they internally tend to think it's their fault because bad things happen to bad people. So it's really about rewiring that, that sort of thought and going back on it. One of my favorite things to do with core beliefs is called the downward arrow technique. This is also CBT as well. And usually what you do is you can start with, maybe you have a thought on, like we said, I'm afraid that somebody will say no to me. So the question to that is, okay, if that were true, what does that mean? So I'm afraid somebody would say no to me, so that means they don't like me. Okay, if that were true, what does that mean? I'm not good enough. Okay, if that was true, what would that mean? I'm, a bad person, we had talked about. So kind of going down saying, what would that mean? What would that mean? What would that mean? Can get to that core belief. And this is actually really powerful for people once they realize what that core belief is, and then we can start changing that core belief.
And the other thing is people ask themselves, why do I keep self-sabotaging? And I think it's hard for you, for the individual to be able to deep down, you need somebody to you need a therapist like you to deep down to find out what's going on. And unfortunately, a lot of people, they can live their whole lives like that. In running a defective program in the back of your mind, because you believe that you're just not good enough, or you're just not smart enough, or whatever. But again, you have to dig down, like you're saying, to find out where is that program coming from.
Right.
But again, even so, we want to get a little bit into the eating disorders.
Yeah, sure. So eating disorders, there's. Some people say, oh, it's just related to trauma, but it's not always. There's many different reasons on why eating disorders may develop. And, primarily we have unhelpful cognitive thinking. So it may be that you don't feel you're good enough, or there's self-worth issues, or perfectionism is another one, that anxiety and perfectionism and needing things controlled. In addition to cognitively, we were talking the other day about medical. So you may have a gene that you're more prone to wanting sugary foods. Also, I've seen people who had medical issues or allergies, and like severe allergies, where it has turned into an eating disorder because it's so uncomfortable to eat certain things. So there's different reasons on why it's caused, and it's maintained because these behaviors, the restricting, the purging, exercising, binging, these behaviors are helping to decrease that anxiety that's involved in that eating disorder, or numbing out an uncomfortable emotion. So once you do that, it's just, again, it's very cyclical. Then, it causes more stress, and it feeds back into those unhelpful cognitive beliefs. So it's a very complex pattern. It's very difficult also when you bring in the nutritional impact. So if you are not getting enough nutrition, you're malnourished, that is going to increase or decrease your cognitive functioning as well. So that adds a whole another layer onto it there. Treatment involves usually a treatment team, so it's dietitian, a PCP to monitor labs, a therapist, your family, if you have family and supports, that's also very important because you need that additional support to help encourage you, to eat your meals and whatnot. And then sometimes you need day programs, residential programs, partial programs, and it can be very intense, very difficult. And it's actually the number one all-cause mortality within mental health diagnoses. So those who have eating disorders have higher death rates versus even like schizophrenia, bipolar depression. So it's very, very serious.
So what's happening then, and I think you mentioned this on the show, and I think your opinion was it's so much being able to take control. I don't have control of anything else, but I have control what I put in my mouth or what I don't. And I'm assuming this is a lot harder for young women than for men. Is that correct?
Correct in the sense that, I think more women receive treatment. I think over time it's become a little more evident that men do struggle with eating disorders. And, it's, again, we talked about social media and all of that. Even more men are now struggling with eating disorders as social media, has kind of put this emphasis on the image of men as much, not as much, but more so than they have been in the past. So physical image as well. But it is, yes, primarily women are getting treatment, but you'd start to see more men in treatment now.
It's interesting because what you're saying, obviously I did a whole show at one point. I was into somebody else. I called it dating strategies of men and women. And you date you're looking at different things. So usually, the stereotype is you want a woman to be thin, and things like that. So again, we're hardwired we want to mate. That's the whole point. Basically mate. So, and most men, they want to be bulky. And what I found is, because I go to the gym a lot, and what happens a lot of times, a lot of these guys at the gym, they call what they're juicing. So they're taking stuff. Yeah. So it's actually the opposite of anorexia. I think they call it, bulkemia. They just want to get as big as they possibly can. Right. And you can even see it on YouTube. Some guys actually will inject oil into their muscles, and it looks freaky. It looks. We talked about body dysmorphia. What you're seeing in the mirror is not what's actually out there, but you're seeing something else. So some of these people, they'll either juice themselves with the anabolic steroids until they're almost dead, because again, that's the feeling of control. You know what I mean? I can't get big enough, no matter how big I get. Yeah. In the mirror, even though everybody tells you you're bulky, it's a different thing. Yeah, so it's funny how that goes like that.
Right. Yeah. It's never going to be enough. Even when we talk about weight and numbers, it's 10 more pounds. It's never going to be enough. It's never going to feel enough, because always looking for that sense of control, and it's not. It's a clouded sense of control. in an unhealthy sense, definitely. But for eating disorders, we do work on some of that CBT that I talked about with challenging. Oh, drop the bag. That the CBT to challenge thoughts as well. But we also sometimes use dialectical behavioral therapy. So DBT looks at your thoughts. So if you think of thoughts as the rational piece, but it also incorporates emotions. So we have our emotional piece as well. And it's really bringing the thoughts and emotions together to create what it's called a wise mind. So DBT was originally created for clients with borderline personality disorders. And it was really meant to treat that very, heightened emotional state. So DBT looks at emotions and helps you to understand your emotions, be non-judgmental to them, accept that they're there, but then also learn to tame them a little bit so that you can go on and live healthy. So it's, a lot about emotion regulation and distress tolerance skills. So learning mindfulness, being one with yourself, so being mindful, being present, and feeling the emotion in your body. So it's really, okay, what emotion are you feeling? Where do you feel it in your body? Because we feel emotions differently in our body. So helping the person become in tune with that, being able to feel the emotion and feeling and expressing it. Because one of the things with eating disorders is the emotion is usually so intense that the eating disorder serves as a way to numb those feelings. So we want people to understand their feelings and feel them. And interpersonal effectiveness is another piece, just being able to work with other people, expressing your needs, which feeds into building your self-worth and having boundaries and what's healthy. So there's a lot of more emotional focused work with DBT.
Right, and the whole thing with the anorexia and the eating disorders, you're looking at it from the biochemical point of view, especially for a woman. In fact, when we did the seminar yesterday, somebody asked me, we talked specifically about, people being overweight, and somebody asked in the audience, and we talked about, it's not how much you weigh, it's your body fat percentage compared to your muscle mass, because technically this BMI, body mass index, is not a good number, because everybody in the NFL is technically obese, but they're solid muscle, so it's what it is, it's the amount of body fat. And somebody asked, they said, well, what's the ideal amount of body fat for a man or a woman? And a woman is much, much different, because women are just entirely different than men. So for a man, they can get down into single-digit body fat.
Oh, wow.
Okay, they can. Bodybuilders, I don't recommend that. You get down around 10%, you probably better watch out. But for women want to be at about 18, 19%. You get too much below that, it really messes up your hormones. Because one of the reasons is, again, we're really smart monkeys. And the main, biologically, a female, the main purpose is to have children, okay? So all of a sudden, if your body fat gets too low as a woman, what'll happen is it'll start shutting your body down. Let's say you'll stop your period, you won't have periods anymore. That happens a lot with runners. They run and they'll stop that. But that starts a whole cascade. It messes up your thyroid, it messes up different type of thyroid problems with it. So it's a slippery slope. When you go down with an eating disorder with a woman, it's a man can get away with it to a certain extent, but a woman, so that, if anybody out there has a child, or if you have an eating disorder, you want to get a hold of it quickly. You can't let it go that far, because it's going to really mess you up, and then you're down a slippery slope.
Yes, yeah. And like you said, that whole mind-body connection again is with those hormones and the cognitive, difficulty with your cognition and all of that being affected by nutrition. So, I think that's also why it makes it such a complex disorder. And yes, treatment is very important. The earlier you can catch it, the better. I have adolescents that I work with right now, and I just tell their parents it's wonderful that they have them in treatment, because they're so much more likely to recover having treatment early on.
Right, it's like anything else. Like I work with clients from the physical point of view. I want to catch it. I want to stop the type 2 diabetes before it starts, not try to deal with it after it's happened. And again, with the young woman, they're in a growing stage. And the other problem is, the possibility, I'm thinking as a biochemist now, is the osteopenia, osteoporosis. So if they're not eating the correct amount of calories and stuff like that, their bones are going to get thinner. They're going to be much more likely as an adult to come down with osteopenia, osteoporosis. So if you think your child or somebody you know has this problem, you really should contact Rachel and look into it. At least get an assessment to see what's going on with that.
Definitely, yeah. Like I said, there's so many different levels of care with outpatient. There's day programs. There's residential. There's inpatient unit programs. So you really want to be able to get it on an outpatient level before it gets to the need of being inpatient. So it's very serious, and getting help as soon as possible is best.
I don't know when I remember, I don't know how it is now, Rachel, but it used to be really, really hard to get into any of these type of treatments. They were all full. Even some of the outpatient treatments are really full right now. It's really hard to see a therapist at any point. Plus, I know even with hospitals, you go into hospitals, you may see this doctor and then this doctor, and you've got 12 different people, and they're looking to go off of one chart. So again, I think seeing somebody like you, to where you see one person, and that's that's the person you can go to with that.
Yeah, that is really important, and the collaborative care, as I mentioned, typically you have a whole team of people, and it's really important that these people are working together and closely and know the client and can really advocate for them. And luckily there are some programs out there that actually have a whole continuum of care, so inpatient, residential, partial, and it's really helpful when you can kind of step down and still be within that system, working with similar people and having that ongoing. Because any sort of therapy, you feel comfortable with somebody you're comfortable with, that you can trust and that knows you. So that's always one of the biggest pieces of healing and recovering, is feeling comfortable with the people that you're working with.
And I can't remember it now. You take insurance, correct?
I do take insurance. I do take most major insurances, which isn't always typical of therapists, but I do take Blue Cross, Harvard Pilgrim, Tufts, Aetna. So, if anybody has questions, they feel free to call me. I do practice in Massachusetts and also licensed in Vermont and Rhode Island currently for virtual counseling, as I mentioned, telehealth.
Right, and that's huge because, again, I have a lot of medical professionals on my show for the last 3+ years, and most people, when they break away from the system, they don't take insurance. So Rachel is very, very unusual. So take advantage of that, because obviously your mental health, your physical health is really, really important, but there's always a money component to that. So if you can get your insurance. And you guys know how much insurance costs right now. So if you can do that, that's a really big deal. Yeah,
definitely. I wanted to make care accessible to people, and the expense piece as well. I recognize, even if you have insurance, there's deductibles, there's co-pays. So, I always tell my clients, I want to make sure you get your money's worth. So let's figure out what your goals are, work on those specifically. I'll teach you skills, some education, go out and try things with homework, come back, and then we'll continue to touch base and say, hey, are you making progress on those goals? And if not, how can we change things and do things differently? So that's really important to me.
And the other thing that I find, Rachel, is that if you're parents with children, the kids never want to listen to you. So first of all, that's it. So it's a lot better to have somebody that's objective on the outside that can deal with this, as opposed to you trying to fix it. And again, you're not a mental health professional either. So, and Rachel's got years of experience, although you don't look that old.
Well, thank you.
Okay, any other, we're running out of time. So again, how do they reach you? Give us a little more information.
All right, so my website is insightfulsolutionsTherapy.org. And my email is rachel@insightfulsolutionstherapy.org, which I believe is on the screen. And my phone number is 781-296-4268. And my book, as I mentioned, with all the worksheets, can be found. It's out right now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and it's called the Mind Reboot Toolkit. Please feel free to check it out and let me know if you have any questions or anything that I can help out with.
Or you can email me, philgeorge@charter.net. And I got Rachel on speed dial. I'll go right over to Rachel. So thanks so much for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
One of the most common questions I'm asked as a biochemist and health coach is, what are the best supplements to take? Choosing supplements is a tricky business. Many companies have poor quality control and questionable ingredients. In the past, I had to send clients to several different websites. I am now able to offer one-stop shopping for all the quality brands I recommend with no shipping cost and a lower price in most cases. Just email me, philgeorge@charter.net, for a free consult.